This church is made entirely of wood. It has stood here for over 800 years, and by every rule we know about timber, it should be long gone. Here is the problem with building anything important out of wood. Wood rots. Not from cold is fine, but from standing damp, from water sitting against it, soaking into the cut ends, and climbing up from the ground. Leave a timber post in wet Norwegian soil, and within a single generation, the bottom of it turns to soft brown pulp. Norway is cold, wet, and buried in snow for months. On paper, it's one of the worst places on Earth to trust a building to wood. Once, this country had perhaps 1,000 of these, some counts say closer to 2,000, wooden churches, scattered across the fjords and valleys. Today, about 28 are left. That sounds like a story of failure. It isn't. The miracle is that any of them are still here at all. The ones that are, like this one at Borgund, built around the year 1180, have barely changed. To find out why a wooden building beat 800 winters, we have to look at how these people built their boats. Start at the bottom, because that is where wood dies first. Earlier churches had their posts planted straight into the ground, and they rotted from the buried ends up. To stop it, you have to get the frame completely out of the wet. Look at the base of the church. Low stone footings run under the building, and on those footings sit heavy horizontal beams, the ground sills. And only then, rising up off those sills, come the tall vertical posts that give the whole tradition its name, the staves. Run your eye along this line, where the stone stops and the timber begins. That boundary, the line the wood is never allowed to cross, is the primary reason this building outlived 1,000 others. But rain still falls on the wood itself, so the next step happens in the forest, years before anyone picks up a tool. The builders use the densest, most resin-soaked heartwood of the Scots pine, known as Malmfuru, or ore pine. To get wood that good, foresters would go to a living pine, strip its bark or cut its limbs, and then walk away, for years. The wounded tree responds by flooding itself with resin, trying to heal, pumping its own wood full of sticky, sappy preservative. Then, and only then, they fell it. Resin is a natural fungicide. Rot struggles to get a grip on wood this saturated. The church is built from timber that was treated before it was ever cut down. Once the cured timber is raised, it needs a final external seal. The whole church, walls, roof, every shingle, is coated in black, sticky, waterproof pine tar. It is distilled from that same resinous pine, brushed on and renewed every few years, over and over for centuries. The building's geometry assists the tar. Look at the roof. Not one surface, but tiers of them, each oversailing the one below. Every edge throws rain and snow out clear of the vertical walls. The building sheds water the way a steep hat sheds it off your shoulders. Then there is the quietest move, the way this massive timber frame is actually held together. There is almost no iron. The staves are notched and grooved to lock into each other. They're pegged with wooden dowels, and the frame is laced with diagonal timber braces, these St. Andrew's crosses, that stiffen the building while still letting it move. Iron nails rust, stain the wood, and lock a frame rigid right where it needs to flex. By holding a building together with more wood, it can breathe. It sways a little in a gale and simply settles back. If you find it quietly thrilling that a medieval church was basically pickled, tarred, and pegged like a longship, you're in the right place. Subscribe. We take one building apart like this 3 times a week. Now, stand back and look at the whole silhouette. The black tarred timber. The stacked, oversailing roofs. Up on the gables, those carved dragon heads swooping off the roof crests, looking for all the world like the prow of a Norse ship. They're thought to have been there to ward off evil, but they act as a visual signature. These are not Viking relics. The Viking Age was already over by the time Borgund went up. This is medieval, Christian Norway. But it was built by the descendants of those shipwrights, and they brought the boat onto the land. Lifting wood from the wet, curing with resin, sealing in tar, and fastening with flexible joints, these are the principles of keeping a wooden hull alive in seawater. A people who had spent generations learning to protect wood from the ocean took that logic, turned the hull keel up, and stood it on a stone. 800 winters of survival is proof of what these materials can do when used correctly. Perhaps we only treat timber as a temporary material today because we've forgotten how to prepare it. If a wooden building can stand for 800 years on stone, resin, and tar, why do we still treat timber as the temporary choice? Tell me below, and which survivor should we decode next? Urnes, Heddle, or loam?